O'Reilly!
You need parts? O'Reilly Auto Parts has parts. Need them fast? We've got fast. No matter what you need, we have thousands of professional parts people doing their part to make sure you have it. Product availability. Just one part that makes O'Reilly stand apart. The professional parts people.
O'Reilly Auto Parts. O'Reilly.
Shop Superstart Premium, Extreme, or Platinum batteries at O'Reilly Auto Parts and get up to a $15 gift card after rebate. O-Reward members can also get a $5 reward with their battery purchase. For power, performance, and reliability, choose Superstart. Only at O'Reilly Auto Parts.
O'Reilly Auto Parts.
Operation Domination is underway. The ultimate game plan to dominate your NFL experience. With your hosts, Dan
You gotta be confident about your Achilles when you
Chase
show up.
Thornton,
Yeah, I mean, I got it.
Chris
Hearing
Dowhouse,
about him sort of pointless in fantasy in the sense.
and Adam LaRue. Don't hope to win. Be great and dominate.
Welcome to this Week 7 edition of Operation Domination. As you can see, the world has decided that the 1 week that we were able to get the four of us together was just too powerful. So they had to separate us yet again, but that's all right. We're manning the ship. I'm Adam LaRue. I'll be manning the fort here, so to speak, for the beginning of this episode. Hopefully we're going to get Dan at some point tonight, but, fingers crossed. We're not 100% sure. Hopefully we do. To my left, at least on my screen, that's Chris Dowhower. Got Chase using my name at the bottom of the screen, but that is Chase Thornton. He's going to get that sorted, and we're good to go. Hey, exciting week in the NFL. Some big news. Coming off of a short week, right? It's interesting to have a game Monday night and a trade Tuesday morning, right? So, let's talk about it. That's the talk of the NFL at this point. Chase, I kicked it to you last week. I'm going to do it again today. Formerly your guys, plural, Aaron Rodgers now has his favorite toy, Davante Adams. What are your initial thoughts? What's this do for Garrett Wilson? And is Davante Adams on the way up?
I'm not sure I love it for Garrett Wilson. I'm not necessarily sure I love it for Davante. I don't necessarily love it, period. Just because I'm not so sure still about the entire situation surrounding the New York Jets. They looked maybe a little better on offense last week. They certainly used Breece Hall a little bit more than it felt like we had seen them use him. But I don't know. I know that they have a connection, and it was an obvious connection. You could see it every time they took the field together in Green Bay. To the point, and Rodgers has missed that with everybody he's played with since. He and Davante have that kind of relationship where they can share a look, literally just a look, and they know what each other's thinking. Rodgers knows where Adams is going to be. Adams knows where Rodgers wants him, which is the big thing of the whole entire, equation here, because that's been the big thing with Rodgers, is that when guys don't do what he specifically wants them to do in the moment, from moment to moment, it may change. But if you don't do what Rodgers wants, then he's just not going to flip and throw to you. And so, Adams' numbers will be fine. I said last week, I think he's probably going to be a little bit more boom bust than we're used to him. I assume he'll hit the field running this week, but it still might take time for him to fit into the system here and into where things are going. I don't know that anybody else sees a damn target this week other than Davante Adams, because Rodgers is probably just so thrilled to have his buddy back. Garrett Wilson, yeah, he's probably the number 2 on this team right now, weirdly enough, even though he's probably the better of the 2 receivers at this point, talent-wise in their career and in their ages. But yeah, it probably boosts Rodgers' numbers, probably is good news for Davante Adams owners. I am one. I have him in a couple places, but I'm not so sure if it's going to elevate the entire offense. I'm still not sold on this whole team yet, based on the drama that reigns from the top down in that organization.
Let me ask you this, Chris. Is Aaron Rodgers, especially in your Dynasty or Superflex or 2 QB leagues, is Aaron Rodgers getting a little interesting? He's already the QB 18. He's someone, or I think thereabouts. He's someone that can be had for relatively cheap. Is he someone that you're now suddenly a little more interested in formats where, maybe not in a 1 QB, but outside of that?
Yeah, I think so, Adam. I mean, I look at him. Devontae Adams definitely boosts his value, of course, especially for this season and maybe ongoing, especially with the contract situation. Devontae's kind of tied to Aaron moving forward. But I also think, this is hard to be excited about, but the Todd Downing move actually was a bonus if this is going to be what we continue to see.
They
Todd
doubled the
Downing's
motion.
They motioned Adam. They called play action. They threw the ball more than 2 yards down the field. I mean, it was like miracles. Now, Todd Downing, let's not get it twisted, is not offensive genius. He's not somebody that we're necessarily excited about. But one of the other things I also saw was a little bit versatility in the running attack as well, which I think is going to bode well for the offense in general, especially in the red zone. Where I think Devontae is going to pay his dividends and Aaron Rodgers is going to be is this team's not scoring touchdowns, and that's where this is going to be a huge bonus. We see the Al Lazard connection in a sense with Aaron Rodgers, and how Al Lazard is basically on fumes, can't play with any other quarterback in the league, but when he's out there, catches touchdowns. So I think Devontae Adams is a significant upgrade over Al Lazard. Mike Williams didn't seem to really have opportunity. He got thrown under the bus. Aaron Rodgers is known to kind of do that. So I think Mike Williams is that guy who got kind of tossed to the side, but he wasn't really utilized as it was. I think this is definitely a boon for Aaron Rodgers and people who want to acquire him for flex leagues and so the flex leagues that you're talking about.
For sure. Devontae Adams not the only wide receiver on the move. We would think that the trade deadline was going to happen the way that players are moving the last couple of days, but we still have a little more time for trades to go through. Having said that, Amari Cooper over the Buffalo Bills. Chase, what were your thoughts there? What's the wide receiver breakdown there? I know Keon Coleman was becoming a popular ad name or trade name, a buy name. Does this put a hamper on that? Are you interested in Amari Cooper, who was obviously having some drop issues there in Cleveland? Was that just disinterest with Cleveland? What are your thoughts on the move as a whole?
Yeah, I wouldn't blame Amari Cooper if he was disinterested in what was going on with Cleveland anymore. I mean, Kevin Stefanski refuses to let go of the Deshaun Watson, albatross that he was saddled with. Listen, Keon Coleman, he looked okay last week, and he's looked okay, and I think we all have hopes that he can be better than he has been, or that he'll blossom into something in this offense. I think it'll be easier with a guy like Amari Cooper across from him. I really do. I'm still interested in Keon Coleman. I'm more interested in Amari Cooper in this offense once he gets up to speed. I'm actually more interested, honestly, still. I've come around on Khalil Shakir out of all three of them. I like what he can offer if he can stay healthy at all. It should be a boon to the whole offense, though. I mean, rising tide float all boats. If this helps improve that offense, because now people have to actually pay attention to the wide receivers, that should help Dalton Kincaid. It should help the run game. It should help Josh Allen out. Should help Josh Allen find some run lanes when he runs. I like the move. I like the move for Amari Cooper probably better than anybody. The Bills needed a guy. Apparently, this had been in the works for a while. It wasn't something they did in reaction to Devontae Adams going to New York. They said that that this had been in the works for a little while, and then it kind of ramped up and hit the finish line there shortly after Adams got traded. But I do like the move overall, and I mean, Cleveland was a sinking ship. Nobody was going to have any fantasy value there. If you drafted Amari Cooper, if you have designs on him at all, this was a great move for you, because it can't go anywhere but up from what's been going on in Cleveland.
Yeah, got to agree. We have one more piece of news we're gonna cover, then we're gonna get to some of your questions. Chris, what do you make of the Russell Wilson starting over Justin Fields out there in Pittsburgh, specifically in relation to George Pickens, right? I think that's the most interesting piece of this offense, or at least it has been to this point. If there's someone that you think maybe can be elevated by Russell Wilson, please let me know. George Pickens, I think, is the most interesting guy, at least to this point, however. So does this help him? I know Justin Fields maybe a more lively arm, but he's also been, he leads quarterbacks in rushing touchdowns from the red zone. He is tied with Jaden Daniels in rushing attempts in the red zone. So he's certainly soaking up some of that touchdown upside for someone like George Pickens. So what are your thoughts with the move to Russell Wilson there and how it impacts kind of his receivers?
First, Adam, I didn't hear Chase mention Curtis Samuel's value. Curtis Samuel, I guess, is something we forgot about in his fantasy. No, talking about fantasy and tanking values. Look, Mike Tomlin must hate offense. First, you hate, hire Arthur Smith. You go and hire Justin Fields has been, more than serviceable. You alluded to the rushing touchdowns and what this might do to George Pickens' value. This is going to kill everybody's value, I think. I look at an offense that's already putridly, play calling as it was. An offensive line hasn't been in good protection. Offensive line that wasn't opening up holes. Najee Harris finally got something going, but guess what? That was against the Raiders with their 6-string receivers. And you basically had no choice but to hand the ball off over and over again to a team that finally broke through. I think this is going to be hurting everybody. Pickens got targeted just as much as he could. He has to be on the field. You can't keep having load management issues when you're 23 years old and not be on the field to get targeted, Adam. So Russell Wilson, we could pretend like he's a deep ball thrower. Well, that was 5,000 years ago in fantasy world. And this is a guy who sucked in Denver, wasn't throwing the ball. We got Cortland Sutton trying to make one-handed catches week in, week out last year, basically waiting for that last-second touchdown opportunity. George Pickens can make those catches, but Justin Fields was not like he was targeting the guy. It's basically a situation where, number one, he's a receiver one with Smith offense, so you're already hated. And then number two, you have a coach that is actually just wants to figure out how to play Neanderthal football and not play winning football and keeping every score close so that he can go 9-7 every year, or now 10-7 now, or 9-8 probably because they suck. But overall, I'm just really disappointed in this whole thing. Justin Fields deserved better. He played in their neutered offense. He did all the things they asked him to do, not turning the ball over. He wasn't trying to be aggressive. What's Russell Wilson going to bring differently to this offense?
Yeah, no, I tend to agree. I don't know that it moves anything too much. Maybe they up the pass volume with Russell Wilson a little bit just because they won't be running him as much. But I don't think things change all that much.
Real quick to that, this is a guy who was leading the sacks in 2 years in a row, being a sack quarterback rate. This guy just drops back, gets sacked almost immediately, holds the ball a long time. Like I said, his offensive line is not good. So I don't think this is going to be a situation where you're going to get more pass attempts. I think this is going to be a situation where the offense gets even worse than they're barely scoring 20 points as it was.
Yeah, no, I think that's a fair observation. We are going to get to some of your questions. Keep asking them. We'd love to interact with you guys in the comments. First off, I'm going 5-1 going into this week. Team is AR Gibbs, Jones, Jettas, DK Metcalf, Tyreek, Evan Ingram. Traded for Tyreek today. Gave, I assume, Devonta Smith and Addison. Tyreek was on a 1-5 team. Figured it was a good deal to make. Yeah, I think anytime you can get a superstar onto your team, it sounds like Tua's coming back soon, and I think it's a good trade. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. I think it was good to superstar receiver, especially the guy who's going to get targeted regardless who the quarterbacks is. Tua should be back at some point, but even Huntley coming off the bye is going to be way better than he's been previous. I think this is a good situation to buy low on Tyreek Hill. Yeah,
you made your starting lineup. Your starting lineup is deeper, and you didn't really give up a whole heck of a lot that you had to worry about. I mean, it's nice that Smitty and Addison are both past their buys, so you are giving that up a little bit, but you already have Jefferson. Tyreek is past his buy now too, so I mean, you're sitting pretty good there. I think it was a good trade overall. I would have done it.
And also, just to throw it in there, how much do you really want to start both Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison anyways? So I think getting Addison off your roster is great in that sense as well. So good trade. I had Jaden Daniels and Josh Allen. Just traded Allen and Monty for CMC, Mason, and Mahomes. I like it. I think that's a good move. Good work.
Yeah, I think you're swinging for the stars in a sense for the playoffs. Hopefully, you're a team that's already going to pretty sure to go to the playoffs. Otherwise, it might get a little rough, especially happens to Mason this week. But I do think overall, I like the move.
Yeah, the running back's an upgrade. It's a downgrade right now, quarterback. And so depending on if it's a 1 quarterback or 2 quarterback league, I mean, if you had Daniels and Allen, you had just about the top 2 things running out there other than Lamar Jackson. So you took a downgrade at quarterback with high upside. I mean, it is still Patrick Mahomes, but you definitely, I like Montgomery, but you upgraded the running back position there, regardless of whether it's CMC or Mason who's playing. So
Chase, will it change your mind when MVS signs with the Chiefs and that's inevitable? It happens.
Oh, yeah, to the moon, baby, to the moon. No, I gave up on MVS long before he ever stepped out of Green Bay. So I am not worried about that at all. That won't change my opinion on this one way or another. And it will also not downgrade Patrick Mahomes getting MVS back. I will say that as well, because he probably won't have to throw to him very often. So not a problem.
All right, rapid fire, Chris. I'm going to you first. Breece Hall or Jahmyr Gibbs in PPR?
That's tough. I mean, I like the Gibbs idea of the PPR, but you haven't really seen the targets that you expected to see, especially with the different guys eating. St. Laporta still hasn't really been featured in this offense yet. St. Brown hasn't really been that target one that you expect to see. So I'm going to go with Hall because this is the guy who obviously is the RB1 in the Jets offense. I think it's going to benefit from the added attention the receivers are going to get. You're going to have a lot of check down opportunities. It's also not good for the Jets either. Aaron Rodgers gets sacked a lot as well, but they like to check the ball down those running backs to kind of offset that. Todd Downing checks the ball as running back, so I go with Hall.
Yeah, I like Hall as well. I think the offense looked good in the sense of them doing the motion, them changing some of the things they were doing in the run game. I thought it was improved. Chase?
And well, the volume, like I said, we didn't see like an even split volume between Hall and Allen this week. It was much more what we think we're going to see going forward. Don't count on 23 touches or whatever a game a week for Hall, but it should be a much more sane balance between the two. When I love Braylon Allen. He's an ex-Badger. But Breece Hall is one of the best running backs in the game, and it looks like they're actually going to finally give him the ball in a commensurate way with that. So, yeah, so far Breece Hall has been about a point per game less than Jahmyr Gibbs this season. But with the upgrade of the offense with Devontae Adams and the way they looked last night or the other night, I think I'll go with Hall the rest of the season.
Sure. One more, and then we're going to get into our cocktail. Honest Thoughts traded Kittle and received Brian Thomas. I have Bowers all ready. Chris.
O'Reilly.
Save on your next oil change at O'Reilly Auto Parts. Choose Castrol Edge Full Synthetic Motor Oil to provide maximum performance and protection for your engine. Get a $15 gift card after rebate when you buy 5 quarts of Castrol Edge for $34.95. Plus 2 times O Rewards points. Offer valid in-store and online at O'ReillyAuto.com.
O'Reilly Auto Parts. O'Reilly.
Shop Superstart Premium, Extreme, or Platinum batteries at O'Reilly Auto Parts and get up to a $15 gift card after rebate. O Reward members can also get a $5 reward with their battery purchase. For power, performance, and reliability, choose Superstart. Only at O'Reilly Auto Parts.
O'Reilly Auto Parts.
Yeah, I think that's kind of a wash move in some senses. If you need to upgrade a receiver, I think it's a nice move. But if you're looking at some flex option, these guys are giving you similar numbers. Brian Thomas knows the sexy upside. The Jacksonville offense is going to be predetermined what they're going to be the rest of the season. I think when you look at Kittle right now, you're getting what you hope for. Purdy and him seem to have a connection. But I would say the upside for you in a sense is that Kittle with return and McCaffrey could see less targets, while you think Brian Thomas, as the season progresses, should, no matter what happens to Jacksonville, that's going to be priority number one to feature the number young receiver.
Yeah,
you kept the more stable of the two in terms of their production. Kittle tends to be high-low. He's had a good year so far, 5 touchdowns so far, but that's not necessarily going to hold. We know that. Like you just said, when these weapons come back and when they're at full capacity, Kittle tends to be more mercurial, whereas Bowers looks like he's got a pretty safe floor in that offense. Now with Adams gone, Bowers is going to elevate even more into that 1B or maybe even the 1A role, depending on, whoever's playing quarterback and who they feel like throwing to. But you kept the more stable option of the two. You upgraded yourself and got yourself a wide receiver 2 with upside for a tight end that was superfluous on your roster. It's a good trade.
Yeah. All right. Hey, lean back. Let's relax and hit the happy hour.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, here it is. Now, okay, gentlemen, In honor of spooky season, because we are in the throes of mid-October now, tonight we are going to be making a pumpkin white bandwagon with everybody else. Not necessarily always been a big pumpkin spice guy, but this one intrigued me here. So when we look at as we look at building our DFS lineups here, there's some bigger point totals compared to last week. There's not as many. Road team was favored, but we do have some bigger favorites on this, on this slate here to try to exploit. So let's get into it here. One of the biggest point totals of the week is going to be 51 points for the total for Seattle at Atlanta. Now it's two middle of the road defenses facing a couple of upper third, type offenses here. It's forecasted to be a shootout. The home Falcons are a field goal favorite, roughly field goal favorite at -3 here. So that's going to be our target game. So we're going to get out our old fashioned glass here, and that's what we're going to build this cocktail in. And to start things off, we're going to make a budget play at quarterback. Strangely enough, if you're wondering where we're going with this, we're going to go with Geno Smith at 5,800. Of the games with the big point totals this week, only Andy Dalton is cheaper at quarterback, but that's Andy Dalton, and I don't have any faith in him or that Carolina Panthers offense right now in terms of, consistency top to bottom. But Geno Smith, 5,800, like I said, cheapest one of the big play quarterbacks here. He's been averaging almost 22 DraftKings fantasy points per game over the past 3 weeks. That's good for quarterback 10. If he can hit that average of 22 points, basically, that would be a great return value for the dollar that we're spending for him. And that allows us to spend elsewhere. For a little contrast, or for, just for some context here, Jaden Daniels is at 7,600. He's the most expensive quarterback on the slate this week for the main slate on Sunday. He's only averaging 22.2 DraftKings fantasy points over the last 3 weeks. So about 0.2 points more than Smith over the last 3 weeks. Good for quarterback 9. I'll spend $2,300 less and take the quarterback. That's a little more affordable there for what we can assume is going to be commensurate value in a shootout there. So we'll pair him then. We'll pair Geno Smith with another bit of a value play here in Tyler Lockett at 5,300. Last 3 weeks, he leads the Seattle wide receiver in DraftKings points there, both in total and in average, despite the fact that he trails both DK Metcalf and JSN, Jackson Smith and Jigba, in both targets and receptions. He's only scored 1 touchdown in that time, though. He's getting the looks down the field. He's getting a lot of yards when he does catch the ball. Like I said, if he can hit that average, just that average that he's hit the last 3 weeks, he'd be a great return on value again with that. So I like pairing him with Geno Smith from that game. Now, you might have noticed when I held up our old fashioned glass here, we've got kind of a fun graham cracker rim on that graham cracker, bit rim around that thing there. That's going to be our counter to the Seahawks from the same game. And that's going to be in the form of Darnell Mooney at 5,600 this week. Mooney's fairly expensive. He is the clear number 2 receiver in Atlanta behind Drake London, but he's been a top 20 play in DraftKings over the last month or so, according to their scoring system. Again, he represents good value. This is a team, in Seattle that is, like I said, they're pretty middle of the road against opposing wide receivers. So I like everything in this game. Let's hope for a big shootout in that. Then we're going to add some ice. We'll add a round ice here to our glass. We're going to talk about our defense for the week. We're going to pay for the Cincinnati Bengals at 3,300 this week. Now they're 6-point road favorites in Cleveland. And I use the word road, in quotes because it's an in-state game there. But it's one of the lower expected point total games for this week. Cleveland has been terrible. They've just been absolutely abysmal across the board offensively. Cincinnati's defense kind of shut me up last week. I made some comments about them being terrible, and then they came out with a real nice defensive performance against Daniel Jones and the Giants there. Their defensive line looks like it's healthy and playing well. Kevin Stefanski is sticking with Deshaun Watson, like we said, come hell or high water. They just traded away their number 1 wide receiver. Their O-line has been an absolute mess. It's in the bottom 3, ranked in the bottom 3 by PFF here for their offensive line rankings. The Bengals are going to be our play at 3,300 here on the road against Cleveland. And then to piggyback off that play, we're going to use Chase Brown as one of our running backs this week. He's 5,900 this week as we're going to pour 2 ounces of vodka to start actually mixing this puppy up here. So Brown has been, intruding on Zach Moss a little bit in the backfield. And, in my opinion, He's a little less prone to game script variances because, especially as he takes more of the rushing work away from Moss. They like him in the pass game. They like him, as a runner. 2 weeks ago, we saw both Brian Robinson Jr. and Austin Eckler have pretty nice games, fantasy-wise against this Cleveland defense here. Eckler actually had by far the better statistic game if in that one, but Robinson had 2 rushing scores, kind of salvaged his day. I kind of like that game as an analog for what we see out of Moss and Brown this week, but I like, Brown to score as opposed to Moss vulturing or taking all the touchdowns. I like Brown to be able to get in the end zone this week. So we're going to use Chase Brown in that game as a big favorite on the road for 5,900. Then next, we're going to add an ounce of Kahlua coffee liqueur. And that's going to be our third starting running back here, or starting wide receiver, pardon me. We're going to pay $6,600, and we're going to get Deontay Johnson in our lineups this week. Now, he's been the biggest beneficiary of that switch to Andy Dalton at quarterback, since they made that switch earlier this season. I'm not overly confident in this offense top to bottom, but Deontay Johnson has been the monster that we hoped for over this past month, minus a bit of a letdown game against the Bears there. This week, he's facing the Commanders, though, in a game with the highest point total on the slate at 52. Washington gives up the 5th most points to opposing wide receivers. Johnson is a wide receiver 1 play for me this week at a low wide receiver 2 price here on DraftKings at 6,600. So that's going to put our wide receiver core at Deontay Johnson, Darnell Mooney, and Tyler Lockett. Now, normally for a White Russian, you'd add an ounce of heavy cream on top of that, or milk if you watched The Big Lebowski. But here in the Mont and Bailey heavy cream rules. We're going to substitute today Real Dairy Pumpkin Spice Creamer for that heavy cream. We're going to put an ounce of that on top. That's really going to flavor this bad boy up. So we'll get that added in there. And we're going to equate that, the spice there, to our tight end play this week. I kind of mentioned him earlier. We've talked about this team a little bit already with the trade here, but Brock Bowers is our tight end play this week. He's a little expensive at $5,800 for a tight end. He's probably going to be a pretty chalky play this week in terms of ownership and that in light of that Devontae Adams trade. But again, we play cash games. We're not going to pass up this kind of an opportunity against the Rams. They give up the 2nd most points to the tight end position. Bowers is the DraftKings tight end 2 this season. He stands to see even more work now in the absence of Mr. Adams. That's going to be our play there. And that's going to bring us to our last 2 positions. We need a second running back still, and we still need our flex, and that's where I'm going to have you gentlemen help me out here. We've still got a decent amount of money left to spend, so we've got options as to how we play this out. Let's look at the running back options first, and this is going to be our garnish, and our garnish is going to be some whipped cream on top with a little sprinkle of that pumpkin spice. But first, we have to figure out who we're going to play at the running back position. So we have, like I said, quite a bit of money left to spend. We've got $11,700 left to spend. We can average over 5,800 player here. So we can pay up at the running back position. We don't want to pay up too high. Saquon Barkley's your highest, paid guy of the week at 8,200. If we pay up that high, we're really scraping the bottom of the barrel with only about $3,000 left, $3,500 left there for our flex position. So let's look a little bit lower on the slate. Now, this is one where you have to kind of watch the injury reports this week, but James Cook is at 7,000. That's not a terrible matchup against Tennessee. Tennessee's a tough defense, but Buffalo is a big favorite there. If they're having to if they run the ball at all with James Cook, if he's healthy, he could be a good play. But again, he's 7,000 there. He's a little bit more expensive on the slate there. We also could go again, if healthy, Devon Achane is at 6,700 here. Now they're facing Indianapolis on the road. If he can be healthy, though, he would stand to see his regain his status atop that running back room. So we could go with Cook at 7,000. We could go with Achane at 67. David Montgomery, who we mentioned earlier, at 6,600 in again one of the highest scoring games on the slate there. Detroit at Minnesota. He's at 6,600. Isaac Guerrero is at 6,600 if Jordan Mason doesn't play. If Mason plays, he's at 7,600. So he's $1,000 more, right kind of in that, almost too high to talk about wheelhouse there when we're looking at spending this last $11,700. Kareem Hunt is at 6,000 against San Francisco. So that's a possibility there. San Francisco, middle of the road against opposing running backs. I guess it depends on how you feel like this game is going to go offensively, whether you want to invest in Kareem Hunt at 6,000. If Cook doesn't play, here's one of my intriguing plays for the week, Ray Davis. He's only 5,200. I don't think that's chasing points that we saw last week. I think that's chasing the opportunity that's in front of him if James Cook doesn't play, with them being large large favorites there at home against Tennessee. So are there any of those running back possibilities that stick out to you gentlemen here between James Cook, Devin Achane, Montgomery, Garendo, Hunt, or Ray Davis? Chris, let's start with you. Where would you be going for this other running back position here?
I'm going to be honest, Chase. I don't love any of those options that you just named to me. The guy that I do like as an option, probably in that price range, might be Brian Robinson. Taking on a Carolina defense is atrocious. Brian Robinson, as long as he's healthy and dresses, is going to fall in the red zone at least once, probably twice, versus that Carolina team that we saw have two rushers, have dominant games with Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier last week. So I like Brian Robinson in my lineup, if he's out of that lineup, I like Austin Eckler for an even more cheaper price.
I do like both of them as well. I agree with you completely there. Like we said, I kind of like the idea of we talked about how 2 weeks ago against Cleveland, Eckler and Robinson, they kind of, both had a big game. And I think that's possible, certainly possible this week against Carolina. Brian Robinson's only 6,400 on the slate. That would leave us quite a bit more money too than the majority of the guys I talked about. So we've got to vote for Brian Robinson Jr. there. I could get on board with that. Adam, what's your thoughts on this other running back position here, though?
I could definitely get on board with Brian Robinson. Of the list of guys that you named, David Montgomery is my favorite, although I will say, to your point, if Cook doesn't play, I think Ray Davis is very interesting based on that game script. I'll throw my hat in for David Montgomery, but I do think, again, if Cook doesn't play, the value is there for Ray Davis, and Brian Robinson is also a very, very good pick.
Yeah, I like if you put Ray Davis in there, that leaves you with 6,500 basically for the flex position, which is looking at guys like across the field from him, not across the field from him, but across the field from Brian Robinson, Chuba Hubbard, who's a kind of a popular play right now this week. You're looking at Tank Dell in that range, Josh Jacobs in that range. We could come back and flex Brian Robinson Jr. if we play Ray Davis in that position. So that's certainly a possibility there too. I like the idea of Brian Robinson Jr. There. I do like David Montgomery as well, but we'll go with Chris's suggestion there, because that Carolina-Washington game, like I said, highest scoring game on the slate. Washington's an 8-point favorite. We expect them to be running a little bit there. So we can plug in Brian Robinson Jr. there at 6,400. That's going to leave us then with 5,300 for our flex position. And like I said, now at 5,300, now we need to make some decisions here. We've got Zach Charbonnet at Atlanta. We've already got quite a few players from that matchup, and I'm not necessarily sure I like Charbonnet over Walker or anybody else in that game in the backfield. You're looking at Jalen Waddle is at 5,300. Sam Laporta is 5,300. Jalen Wright is 5,200. Ray Davis, as we said, if James Cook doesn't play, we could flex Ray Davis here and get both Davis and Robinson in this lineup. Alec Pierce is 5,200. Dontavian Wicks, if he plays, is 5,200. Anybody in this price range here that you guys are interested in? Adam, we'll start with you this time.
Yeah, I mean, if we find out James Cook isn't playing, I think that's the smash, is Ray Davis for me.
Yeah, that would probably be my opinion on that too. But Chris, do you have any other thoughts on this?
Yeah, I know you guys are so excited about Ray Davis. I just want to caution. I know that Tennessee is not a good team, but they are a good run defense. And this is a team that Ty Johnson is going to own the passing situation. So even if, Cook is out, I wouldn't necessarily think Ray Davis is a smash, but the value is definitely there. I like that value if he's a price range. But I think for me, I'm looking at some of those tight end options. I like those tight ends sometimes for the cheaper options. I might look even like somebody like trying to think off the top of my head some of the tight ends I like this week. I might look at Pitts in that Seattle matchup. I might look at some of the guys for those cheaper tight ends that might be around that range, because sometimes you can find some guys that have good matchups, but that price is usually really low for the tight ends. And sometimes
Dalton Kincaid is affordable there at 5,000.
Well, you won't get me to say that one, Chase, but that's
well, I'm just saying, like,
the thinking.
Tucker Kraft is 4,600, so he leaves you a lot of money left that you could actually go back and maybe respend somewhere up the board if you wanted to. Like I said, LaPorta's 5,300.
I'll throw a cheap price guy out to you that I do like is Trey Tucker, especially if Myers doesn't play. Myers might be an option too. I think he's pretty cheap this week as well. But Myers, if he is out, Trey Tucker might be a guy versus the Rams. This Rams offense could be back to full capacity with Cooper Kupp this week. They're going to need to score points for the Raiders. Aiden O'Connell is going to throw the ball at some point to different receivers. If Myers, like I said, if he's out, Bowers isn't going to catch everything. Like Trey Tucker is a cheap option as well.
Yep, Trey Tucker definitely a cheap option there to be had at 4,200. So if you plugged him in, you'd leave yourself a lot of money to respend somewhere else. For purposes of building this out, let's assume that James Cook either doesn't play, or even if he does play, there's a chance that toe injury gets would flare up again. He might have to come back out. We'll go with the Davis, we'll go with the Ray Davis play there in our flex position, but there are options to be had there, like we said, because we left ourselves quite a bit of money here for these last two positions. So with that, we are going to add a little bit of whipped cream on top of that guy, and then we're going to take our pumpkin spice, put a little bit of a splash on top of that for some presentation. And there you have it, folks. That is our pumpkin spice White Russian in honor of it being October. I like that better than cappuccino. So enjoy and good luck this week in your DFS plays.
That looks fantastic. Definitely make sure you check in with Chase either on X or on the Fantasy Advice Network for that recipe, because it looks awesome. As you may have seen, we have Dan in the building on the stream.
As he flashes in and out of reality with us.
Still working in on it, but
yeah,
he's present. All right, but we will go ahead.
And present and accounted for. Sorry about the delay, guys. Can you not hear me?
You went in and out, buddy. There we go.
All right, while he is working on that, we are still going to go ahead and move over to our good old dominating defense of the week. Chris?
All right, so for dominating defense of the week, I'm going to be going with a defense that's playing against the offense that hates offense, and that's the Pittsburgh Steelers playing the Jets. I'm going with the Jets defense. Russell Wilson is going to be a sitting duck behind that offensive line. Arthur Smith has no idea how to play call. I love the opportunity for this guy being rusty, coming out of defense is going to be hungry, and offense is going to have a lot of hype around it, playing this team for the New York Jets that I think has got a lot to prove and has asked to win this game. I think this is a smash spot for the Jets defense. I like the Jets to dominate defense of the week.
All right. I like it. And we can go ahead and keep it with you for the offensive observation.
You find me offensive. I find you offensive for finding me offensive.
All right, Adam. So we talked about the different things that we've seen change offensively. We kind of alluded to that even Todd Downing somehow was an upgrade over what we were seeing for the New York Jets with under Daniel Hackett. So I'm going to go to you first, Chase, and then Adam with my question. What offensive coordinator that's tangible, so we can't just like name this place because he won the name. So is tangible offensive coordinator would you like to see demoted and another opportunity given to a different coach for the rest of the season? So as Chase, to you.
I'm not going to stop piling on Arthur Smith. It pisses me off. It seems like he left his aura behind in Atlanta. Now that they've got Bijan Robinson and still don't want to freaking use him. Now he's up here in Pittsburgh and they still can't figure out how to get their best players on the field consistently, healthy or not. I have no confidence in that dude calling an offense that's going to be any kind of consistent, that's going to be consistent at all, that's going to actually use the best players that they have in the best positions. He just doesn't seem like he feels like he's always trying to be the smartest guy in the room, and he needs to just go back to what he did in Tennessee and just give the ball to your best dude, throw the ball to your best dude, have the guy throwing the ball who is going to put up the most points for you, make that guy the guy that's going to throw the ball for you instead of dancing and wishy-wash back and forth. You can blame some of that on Mike Tomlin, but Mike Tomlin brought in Arthur Smith to supposedly, work this offense and run this offense. I just don't see it. I would love to see someone else get a shot there in Pittsburgh. I don't necessarily have a name for you at this point because
no, that doesn't matter. Like I said, just you're looking for a guy that you just like to see removed for the rest of the season at some point that's tangible, maybe upgrade some fantasy value. Adam, I'm going to go to you. What offensive coordinator would you like to see get the boot or demoted, another chance to a different voice there?
It hurts me so much because I really liked this guy towards the beginning of his career, kind of similar to Arthur Smith, who I definitely liked coming out of Tennessee. And I had optimism with him going to Atlanta, but obviously that did not work out in the slightest. This is another guy who I had some optimism with, but has really disappointed me over the last year and a half and has taken that to a whole nother level this season. It's just dreadful. And that's Ken Dorsey. I can't stand it. Like, build your offense around the players actually on your roster instead of like just, oh, this is my scheme. Like that's college crap, to be honest with you. Like just this is my scheme and I'm running it regardless of the pieces, the tools that I have to work with. Like you have to adjust to the players on your roster. He doesn't have the players to run his rinky-dink spread offense that he wants to run so bad. Like you need to be a downhill team. We've had this conversation on the show before that I don't know that there's necessarily a pathway to success with Deshaun Watson as the quarterback regardless, but I can definitely tell you that by being, physical, making that your identity as the Cleveland Browns, it's going to be an improvement. Is it enough of one? I don't know. It remains to be seen, but making your identity Deshaun Watson throwing the ball is not going to work. Giving him passing volume is not going to work. I am very confident that won't work. I think anyone making that decision, continuing to make that decision, I think it's a fireable offense. I know the ownership wants Deshaun Watson out there, or it seems that way. That's fine. Take the ball out of his hands then. It just can't happen.
All right, Dan, do we have you?
Question. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
The internet's not the bestest, but you can hear you.
As
All
long
right.
as you can
So
hear me,
the question for you, Dan, the question for you is there an offensive coordinator that you could think of that you would like to see demoted or replaced that's tangible for the rest of the season that would bump fantasy value like we saw with Todd Downing this past week?
And Dorsey and Arthur Smith are accounted for.
Well, those would be the two favorite ones there, right? Let's see. I'm trying to go ahead. Yeah, can we go to one of the questions from Hurts and Pacheco? What do
Well, I think Dan says, I think Dan's coming in and out on us there. So we'll go for.
Yeah, well, let's check what George has here. Hey, guys, should I trade Mason and Kyler Murray for Hurts and Pacheco? So Jordan Mason, Kyler Murray for Jalen Hurts and Pacheco.
And non-PPR, by the way. It's non-PPR, which it actually means something in this context, because if you're looking at PPR, Murray and Mason are both about a half point step down from Hurts and Pacheco in terms of the numbers this year. But if you're looking at non-PPR, then the running backs actually get flipped, and it's actually about it's about a 1.5 difference or so in favor there. It really does make it a more interesting trade, in my opinion, because you go from being a downgrade at both positions to being, basically about a point per game on average increase if you take that Mason and Murray. So what do you guys think? Adam, what's your take on this trade? Would you be doing that? Would you be taking Mason and Murray for Hurts and Pacheco, or which side of that trade do you like best?
I'd be presumably I'm leaning towards Mason, I think, the Mason and Kyler side. I haven't fully trusted this Eagles offense. It's just felt very weird. It feels off. They feel kind of game in and game out. So that's as far as Jalen goes. And then Pacheco is one that I'm worried about how fast he gets worked back in just due to the nature of the Chiefs, right? They're such a playoff-centric team. I mean, you saw it. It feels very clear that last season they were off the pedal with Kelsey, right? After his injuries early on in the season, the way that he stepped up so big at the end of the season, then going into the playoffs, but it just had been kind of piddling around prior. It feels like they would be the type of team that would not press the gas, getting Pacheco back into the fold. So that's kind of what leads.
So you're leaning Murray Mason in this one.
Yes.
Okay, Chris, does it make any difference to you? Does it change your thinking at all, or does it change the calculus here in the idea that Mason might be on the way out once CMC comes back, whereas Pacheco is on the way back in, and rest of season here? What's your take on that part of the equation?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I'm not really interested in that trade overall. I think that you're just basically pushing one hand for another. You're hoping that you get Pacheco back, as I alluded to, at some point healthier for the playoff stretch, but there's no guarantee. We don't know what CMC's situation is going to be either, so it's not guaranteed Jordan Mason is going to fade to oblivion either. 49ers are also a playoff-centric team as well, so they don't rush to get CMC on that field either. So there's a lot of different things that are at play. I would have my kind of move. I like Hurts more than I like Kyler Murray, but that's the only thing that kind of motivates me in that deal.
All right. Yeah. Well, hey, I tend to I probably like the Hurts Pacheco side of this more, even though it hurts me to say that, no pun intended, with Kareem Hunt. As I picked him, I was really aggressive picking him up across the board, but with the idea that Pacheco's coming back, Hurts has been a little bit better than Murray this season in terms of scoring average. I'm a big Kyler Murray guy too. Yeah, I mean, I don't like either side enough that I would feel like I had to make this trade. That's my take on it. I don't feel like I'm riding the fence when I say that. He's asking, should I trade them? I'm saying, you don't feel like you have to. It's not a giant enough upgrade in either direction for me to say that it's worth it. So I wouldn't worry about making the trade.
Sure. Chris.
All right.
Real quick, Jordan Mason or Brian Thomas Jr.? Mason if he plays. And
yeah, I agree.
Segment.
I go with Mason if he plays.
Okay. All right, continue. Sorry.
That's okay. So we got our two different offenses we kind of talked about. We lost Dan, unfortunately, through his part to get his kind of comment, what his take on it was. So I'm going to ask you guys another question. What offense or offensive players are you not buying so far this season? So there's different things that we're seeing. Kind of people think the trends, are going to continue for the rest of the season. That's not a guarantee. You can go back, previous years. You can keep going back to week 10 and see if things don't always play out for the rest of the season. So what guys are offensively are you, whether it's an offense in general or players on an offense, are you not buying for the rest of the season? I'll start with you, Adam.
Yeah, Chuba Hubbard. He is. I liked him coming out of the draft, but this is ridiculous. I think he's a good running back. I think I'm not
2 years in a row.
I'm not necessarily shocked that he's overcorrect, that he's improved. I don't think improvement is that crazy. But we're talking about, by a lot of metrics, the most efficient single running back in the NFL right now, and I think that's not happening. That's not the reality that I'm living in, where he's the best running back in the NFL. Now, if he becomes a solid to lower tier starter, yeah, sure, that's fine. I think he's a hell of a lot better than Miles Sanders, for instance, and I think he's a serviceable running back, but he's just that, a serviceable running back. I don't think he's going to be a consistent RB1 throughout the entire season.
All right, Chase?
I'm not going to buy Stephon Diggs as a top 10 receiver the rest of the season here like he has been so far, points per game, fantasy points per game. I mean, Nico Collins was shooting the lights out and was absolutely phenomenal. And now the Tank Dell is healthy and firing on all cylinders here, and they're going to be getting their running game back up and going here with a healthy Joe Mixon, as far as I understand. I can't buy Stephon Diggs maintaining any kind of top 10 points per game pace. Now he's not shooting the lights out in terms of his, career average or anything like that in terms of a half PPR setting. He's outscoring last season though. And I thought he was better last season in Buffalo. I liked his fit better in Buffalo. I'm not necessarily sure that I like him as much in Houston. So I'm not sold on Stephon Diggs being a top 10, top 12 type wide receiver for the rest of this season. Enjoy it while you got it. But if you can sell high, get out from underneath him, I would seriously be listening to those offers.
All right, Adam, talk about selling. Scott offered Walker and Wandell for Swift and Deontay. What are you doing in that deal? It's a full point PPR league.
Walker and Wandale Robinson for Swift and Deontay. I'm keeping, assuming that you have Swift and Deontay, which is how I'm reading this.
He offered Walker and Wandell.
Yeah, I'm holding.
All right. And then one more question real quick. Chase, we got Brian here. He's a 10-man PPR. He's 6-0. He's got Stroud, Caleb's receivers for Chase, DK, MHJ, Deontay Johnson, Waddle, his RBLs, blah, blah, blah. Where's your question at, buddy?
No, that's the same guy that just asked us about the trade for Swift and Deontay. He's saying now, should he get rid of Swift and Deontay? He's got Kamara and Swift. He's got Brian Robinson. He's got, he's got a decent stacked roster already. I don't necessarily think you need to make that trade, especially like you said for Walker, who's had some injury problems this season, and Wandale Robinson, who has looked really good, has looked like the guy that they drafted him to be, but Malik Neighbors will be coming back. Do you have faith that Daniel Jones continues this? I kind of do, but I'm not ready to bet my farm on that yet. I would hold serve there, Brapon.
Another note there, I think Deontay Johnson is someone that we're likely seeing on the way up. I mean,
yes,
and this is so insane for Deontay Johnson throughout his entire career, even when the Steelers offense was good that he was on. He is, I believe, and I want to get this right, he is second in the NFL in red zone targets. Deontay Johnson, Mr. Never Gets Touchdowns in the red zone,
right,
is second in the NFL in red zone targets right now. He hasn't converted a ton of them, but he's getting the volume.
Of the four players that you're talking about in this potential trade too, Deontay is literally the one guy I would say his trajectory is definitely, the arrow is pointing up. Go ahead, Chris. You were going to say something there.
I was going to say, I strongly disagree with both of you. I think Deontay Johnson's got a Bryce Young problem going down the surface, down the road, especially as the Carolina Panthers continue to lose games. I think Bryce Young will return to starter sooner than later for that offense. Swift's going to kind of be somebody who's been striking well as of late, but I do think we've seen Johnson being that red zone guy who can be the steal some vulture touchdowns. Kenneth Walker's a superstar running back right now. As long as he's healthy, he's one of the best running backs you could have in your roster, I think. So I think for me, Kenneth Walker makes that move plausible for me. But we move on. So Adam, talk about hot and cold, different people that we're looking for long-term and short-term. What are we looking for when it comes to taking that temperature?
Yeah. Let's get into the Dynasty temperature check.
Hot so hot in here.
Cool. So for this segment, we're gonna go check some guys who are actually moving in Dynasty. Hey, this is the right time to be trading. I think this is when I personally in Dynasty get my most trading done, right? Because you're deep enough in that you can kind of get a gauge into where your team is, what your team is. Are you a contender? Are you a pretender? Are you, firmly out of it this season? And you can actually start making some moves based on, tangible evidence of what your roster is so far. So this is the time of season where I'm really hammering it. So with that being said, these are some guys who are moving frequently in a bunch of leagues. We're going to start with Dallas Cowboys running back Rico Dowdle. Chase, I'm going to end up hitting this over towards you. So Rico Dowdle right now is the second most traded running back and the second most traded player overall. Number one's at running back as well. On Keep Trade Cut, he is up 7 spots. This week he is non-applicable on the ECR, but he's been a solid in the RB2 to RB3 range. with some upside. He's going for things like he's pretty cheap on the whole. Round 2 pick. I've seen various years, whether that's straight up a 25 or a 2026. I've seen Jacoby Myers. I've seen Blake Corum, and he is definitely a very powerful throw in on some deals. So Chase, what is your opinion on the value of Mr. Rico Dowdle? Is he someone you're buying, holding, selling?
No, I'm selling him. I don't want to cut you off, but I'm just excited to tell everybody that I'm selling my ass on Rico Dowdle because he just doesn't interest me. I'm not excited about him. He's not young for a running back. He's 26. He's not young for running back, but he's also not overly worked for a running back at this age yet because he hasn't seen a ton of carries or a ton of touches here in his first 4 years in the league. But he is nothing special as far as an NFL running back goes. He's helped because he's sharing a backfield with a completely washed up Ezekiel Elliott right now. But he's running back 34 this season. At the moment, he's running back 34 in points per game. Now, we had this report yesterday. McCarthy says, we need to give him the ball more. Yeah, do you think, Big Mike, your offense is completely broken? You just faced the Detroit team that gives up the 5th most points of the position, and you gave the dude like 6-7 carries. You think he might need to see the ball more? Do something that works, dude. I'm not a Rico Dowdle fan. He is the back to own in Dallas this year. But that's not saying much. Like I said, he's up against Ezekiel Elliott. If you could get a 2nd-round pick for him, if somebody wants to give you Blake Corum in Dynasty for Rico Dowdle, that is a trade-off I would make all day long. If you can use him as a throw-in for something, I would do it. If somebody is trying to use him as a throw-in to sweeten the deal, that would not excite me, wouldn't interest me. See if you own him, see if you can toss him off to a contender type team for something, and and try and convince them that he's Dallas's number 1 running back, and it's Dallas, and their running back is always supposed to be good. But I'm selling Rico Dowdle in Dynasty right now. I don't want keeping him.
Yeah, I'm definitely not buying him. If I'm a contender, then maybe it's a conversation about keeping him around, especially if you got him for free, right? He was an easy waiver last year. So if you kept him through the offense, you had him for free, sure. Like, hold him, and you have depth at the position, get some spot starts out of it, that's fine. But I definitely wouldn't be spending on him anything meaningful. So largely agree there. Chris, we're going to get to your namesake there. That's Chris Olave, who is the 13th most traded player overall at the wide receiver position. He's the 4th most traded. He's down 1 spot on keep trade cut. He is also NA because he is out this week, or at least expected to be for the New Orleans Saints. He's a more expensive player. We don't get to talk about guys who are super, super expensive. It's normally the mid tiers. I'd say Rico Dowdle is on the lower end of what we talk about, but it normally is within that range of guys between Olave and Dowdle. So he's one of the more expensive guys we've talked about. Have seen him go for as low as a single 25 round 1, but normally are adding something onto that. Also seen Rashee Rice. Here's another example of 2026 first as well as a 27 first. Or I saw this one. I actually grabbed it specifically because I thought it was interesting. There's Chris Olave plus Rashid Shaheed for Nico Collins, who I know this show on the whole isn't always the biggest fan of Nico Collins, but he has been and is one of the more dynamic young wide receivers. So Chris has dodged his question.
That's all right. I could take this one here.
Oh, and we have
we're back.
We're lost all of us, but that's okay. I'll get the names fixed. But Chris, well, what are your thoughts on Chris Olave? Did you hear those values there?
Yeah, I mean, I think about some first rounders, some different players that you can get for Chris Olave. Nico Collins, the player that you're talking about. Like I said last week, I have to kind of eat some crow. Nico Collins, definitely a player that I think is better than I gave him credit for, and a player that's fitting well in this offense. Still the primary read. We'll see how it kind of progresses as things move forward. But as going to be a guy that they paid, and will be somebody a featured part of their offense. I think Chris Olave is a guy, Adam, that I'm not going to sell necessarily for cheap, but I am going to look to buy on cheaper if people are looking to move him. Like you said, a guy whose value is usually one of the higher values we don't see get moved like this, but a guy that people seem to be more down on. I think people seem to be more realistic with Chris Olave. I don't think he's ever going to be Justin Jefferson. I think they'll expect him to be his receiver one that he's never going to probably grow into be. But I also think on the flip side, I think you have a very good receiver in New Orleans offense is going to be starter playmakers. He's never going to be a receiver one. Chris Olave definitely has that. They don't have a lot of cap space for this offense. This team is not going to have. They do have draft capital, as you don't spend a lot of it on receiver. So I think Chris Olave, whether it's in New Orleans or somewhere else, is going to be a guy who's going to be a key piece of people's offense and a guy that you can try to add if you can. But like I said, I'm not looking to sell very cheap either.
Chris Olave is a real interesting case study in Dynasty right now, because I think he came into the league, we all felt like he was really awesome. I think we feel like we've seen the talent flash. You guys know how many career games he has with double-digit catches, over 10 catches?
What, like 6?
No, less than that. You're going to say less than that. I know his numbers
career. His career high in catches in a game is 9. His career high in targets in a game is only 15. His career high in yardage for a game is 147. And he's never had a 2-touchdown game in almost 2.5 years now as a professional receiver. He's never had a 2-touchdown game. His career highs are 9 catches. His career high for targets is 15. Career high in yards is 147. For context, Malik Neighbors already has 2 games this season where he's seen over 12 targets. Where he's caught double digit passes, and he already has a 2-touchdown game. Jaden Reed in a year and a half has 3 multiple touchdown games. I like Chris Olave, but is he ever going to grow into what we all kind of feel like he should be? Right now, I feel too like if you sell him right now, you're selling him on the fact that he's got an injury right now and he's having a down season right now. So you're selling him short right now. I'm going to hold him for right now. But at what point is he just kind of is what he is, a low-end wide receiver 2, high-end wide receiver 3 kind of thing, and we give up on the idea that he's got a ton of talent? Guess who else is supposed to be talented? Kadarius Toney's supposed to be talented too. He hasn't done smack. He hasn't done near what Chris Olave's done. But my point is, at what point do we give up on the talent that we all think we know is there and start to evaluate him based on his actual production and what he's done so far?
Yeah, no, fair points. I think he definitely it bears looking into at least a little bit, considering your options. I mean, for me personally, am I giving him up for a single 2025 first? No, but no. Throw 2, like that 2026 and 2027 first. Considering it.
And I mean, just to kind of further my point too, that 147-yard game that's his career high in yardage, that was week 3 of his rookie season. So I mean, is it there? Is it really there, or we have our blinders on when it comes to Chris Olave?
Let's keep it in New Orleans real quick, and we're going to go to Spencer Rattler. Chris, I have to kick it to you. I know I just did, but this is just one of your favorite players, Spencer Rattler. He is the 8th most traded player overall. He is the 2nd most traded quarterback. He's up 6 spots on Keep Trade Cut. ECR, he is the QB 30 for this week. He is going for the likes of a 2nd-round pick, Troy Franklin, J.K. Dobbins, or you can add a 2nd for to Spencer Rattler and get you something similar to Terry McLaurin. Is he a buy, sell, or hold for you, Chris?
I don't know where Dan's button is, the sell button, but Adam, I think you know my answer to this. Look, Spencer Rattler is a guy that it's a figment of everybody's imagination that they want to create because the quarterback class was so poor this past year. This guy never completed more than 6% of his passes in college. That got benched 3 times in college. This guy has got his position basically because they needed somebody that could move around in the backfield because their offensive line is putrid. Without Taysom Hill, there's no other blocker. We talked about this last week about the Orleans offense, how it's going to struggle without having Taysom Hill or have that center in their offense. I think this is a guy that if I can get any kind of value, especially talking about people like J.K. Dobbins or Terry McLaurin with package deals, Adam, sell. Spencer Rattler is not a guy who has long-term value in New Orleans. Isn't a guy who's going to be a starting quarterback. He's a 5th-round pick they spent on this guy. Was the last 5th-round pick you guys seen starting in the NFL for long term. This isn't going to be somebody other than maybe Brock Purdy. I know the 49ers, but this is not a 49er team. So this is a lot of situations that we're not going to see Spencer Rattler be somebody suddenly is going to be the next coming of somebody. But if people want to think he is and the hype's still building around him, Adam, I think the fantasy game's all about, especially, and you're definitely can speak more to this, but when it comes to, dynasty leagues, I think the hype is where you want to make most of your hay in a sense, because the hype when it comes to drafting or hype down on certain players or down players is the time to kind of make your moves, because this is when you can kind of make hay in the sense of dynasty.
But that being said, though, I mean, I don't mean to cut you off, Adam, but Chris, I tend to agree with you. I want to sell, but if you're going to sell him, do it tonight. Do it tomorrow. Do it before Denver gets a hold of his ass tomorrow night. If you're going to buy him, if you want to buy him for whatever reason, wait until after tomorrow night when Denver gets a hold of him so that you can, pick up the rotting carcass that is going to be Spencer Rattler after tomorrow. Denver is 4th in the league in pressure rate. They're 2nd in the league in sacks. They're number 1 in blitz percentage. We saw what Tampa Bay did last week. Another team that likes to blitz a lot. 5 sacks last week. They don't have Patrick Surtain tomorrow night, but Spencer Rattler's not going to have Chris Olave. He's not going to have Rashid Shaheed. He's probably not going to have Taysom Hill tomorrow night. Personally, I'm holding him just because all of my dynasty teams are super flex. But if you're going to sell him, do it before 7 o'clock Central tomorrow night, dude, because otherwise nobody's going to want to give you anything for him after Denver rakes him over the coals.
The best time to trade Spencer Rattler was halftime of this past game, and the next best time is right now.
When they had a lead. They had a 3-point lead at halftime. Yep.
All right. We're going to kick it into some big time bets real quick. We'll just read through these real quick. So these are some bets from Dan, who tried to make it in, but the internet was just not allowing it. So the bets are Demario Douglas over 42.5 receiving yards. Douglas has 9 targets in each of the last 2 games and is been well over the 42.5 mark. The Jags look like a team ready to implode, especially on defense. They've allowed the most yards to wide receivers in the league. Jags have allowed the 4th most yards, passing yards per play, and Drake May is an obvious improvement over Brissett. Next bet is Tony Pollard over 65.5 rushing yards. Has been over that mark in back-to-back games. Tyjae Spears likely to miss with a hamstring. Bills have allowed the 9th most rushing yards to running backs and have allowed the most rushing yards per play. Tank Dell over 58.5 receiving yards. Led the team in first read targets without Collins. More competitive, potentially higher scoring game with the Packers. Packers are just middle of the pack in yards allowed to wide receivers and pass yards per play. So reading that back, that's Demario Douglas over 42.5 receiving yards. Tony Pollard over 65.5 rushing yards. And Tank Dell over 58.5 receiving yards.
We are optimistic this week. Woo!
Absolutely. All right, real quick, we're going to move into...
And I'll crush you like a paper cup.
All right, Chase, start us off on the crush or bust. We're going to move through this rather quick and then get some questions.
All right. Well, my crush for the week is going to go right. Yeah, a bit of a disappointing week last T. Higgins. His long in that game was only 15 yards, so he was remarkably consistent catch there. He's averaging almost 10 targets a game on the year, and he's facing an Eagles pass defense right now that gives up the 6th most points fantasy wide receivers. They are particularly vulnerable to the slot. They've given up the 2nd most points to opposing slot wide receivers there. Neighbor might play, okay, and I hope he does, but even if he does, that can only help Wan'Dale Robinson, in my opinion, as it will draw some coverage away from him. I have Wan'Dale Robinson as a high-end wide receiver 3 flex play, type for me this week. In Dan's crush, Dan is crushing on Tank Dell this week. Tank has an ECR this week, ranked all the way up at wide receiver 15. So if you're in a deep league, he's a wide receiver 1 for you. Dan says, hey, Tank Dell had a 91% route share last week, a 28% target share without Nico Collins. Nico Collins should still miss this week. I said that I don't expect Stephon Diggs to continue, being a top 10 type wide receiver. Tank Dell is a big part of the reason why. Dan loves Tank Dell this week. That's his crush.
Cool. Chris, what you got?
Guess who's back, Adam? Cooper Cup, ECR 22. What are people stupid? Last time we saw this guy out there getting 22 targets for this offense, returning to an offense that still has Kyrie Williams, Matthew Stafford, back or no back injury, is going to be out there. I love Cooper Cup. In week 1 or not, he's going to be healthy. We know the Rams are going to be on the cautious side with this guy, so I have no problem putting him in my lineup because of most guys. Like I said, the Rams are overly cautious with their players. This is a guy I'm going to fire up with confidence. If he's going to be healthy out there, my receiver, definitely a top 10 receiver, but ECR 22 is just maddening.
I'm hoping.
All right, I'm going to keep it simple. I want to attack this Browns rushing defense. They haven't been very good. They've been pretty kind of running backs. And finally, over the last 4 weeks, Chase Brown has taken over the red zone rushing role specifically. And last week, he finally overtook the snap count in general. Obviously, that game wasn't. Bengals always felt like they were in control, but they didn't necessarily get as far away to where that's going to impact the snap count. So I do think that's a genuine switch. And again, he had been already starting to take over the red zone rushing role. So Chase Brown, ECR has him at 21. I am very, very confidently playing him as a high-end RB2. Love Chase Brown this week. On to our bust. We can keep that same order.
All right, here. Let me go through Dan's bust real quick. Dan's bust for the week is going to be Kyler Murray. Kyler Murray's got an ECR of QB 17. Dan has him actually ranked as QB 11, he says, but he's unlikely to have his top target in Marvin Harrison Jr. They're dealing with that concussion. Typically, Murray would have a strong rushing floor, but that hasn't necessarily been the case this season. He only has 2 top 12 finishes. Now, granted, those 2 top 12 finishes in rushing were 5th and 1st on the year, but he hasn't been as consistent as we would like him to be there. The Chargers are only allowing also the 6th fewest fantasy points and the 9th fewest rushing yards to opposing fantasy quarterbacks. So Dan has Kyler Murray as his bust of the week. My bust of the week is going to be Dalton Kincaid. Now, I know that we all hate to hear me talk about a tight end as a bust for the week, but Dalton Kincaid is 6th in tight end targets this season, but he's just 14th in fantasy half-point PPR this season so far. He's coming off a top 10 finish against the Jets, but listen, those 51 yards that he had last week, that was his most of the season, as were his 6 catches he had last week. He only has 1 touchdown on the season. That was week 3 versus the absolutely horrendous Jacksonville Jaguars. He's facing a Titans defense that allows the fewest points to opposing tight ends. And for those of you who want to claim that he's just a big slot receiver and he's not really a tight end, oh, by the way, Tennessee also allows the 2nd fewest points to opposing wide receivers as well. They're a tough defense in general. Plus, the Bills have that shiny new toy there in the pass game for Damari Cooper. They could get James Cook back. You likely don't have a hands-down better tight end option right now than Dalton Kincaid, but you're going to have to temper your expectations this week. There's not a lot to like about him in this matchup, I don't think. Dalton Kincaid is my bust of the week.
All right, my bust of the week. Sorry, Adam, I'm going to pile into the poor Colts, but Anthony Richardson coming back, which is super exciting, I guess, for Colts fans. It's not very exciting for receivers, pass catchers for that Colts team. And Josh Downs is a guy at ECR 32 this week. To me, he's not a receiver 3 to have in your lineups. Guy, I'm trying to figure out different options and then put him in my lineup. Look, Josh Downs been to have a nice little stretch, but that was with Joe Flacco. He had a nice little stretch last year. It was Gardner Minshew. Him and Richardson have not had that connection that you're looking for. Richardson has yet to show that he can complete passes with consistency. So this is a guy that I'm very cautious when he returned this week, especially that passing attack. The Dolphins team seems like it's something you exploit, but they have some decent secondary players. I do not like the matchup for Josh Downs this week. Is the guy I avoid having my lap if I can.
All right, keeping it at the wide receiver position, my bust of the week is going to be the ECR's wide receiver 25. That's Darnell Mooney, who I very much so like season long. I just think Atlanta's shown you that if they can run, that's what they're going to just do, take the easy win. And that's where Seattle's actually been, hemorrhaging to other offenses, right? They're an awful run defense, and they've been pretty solid against the pass. Detroit game notwithstanding, they've been solid outside of that Detroit event. And look, Detroit can make any team embarrassing. Just look at Jerry Jones. So I am staying away from Darnell Mooney. I think it's going to be very similar to this past week with Carolina, where the volume's just not there. Again, I like him season long, just don't think it's his week.
Dan would like to clarify as well that the ECR has Kyler Murray at quarterback 11. He is the one who has Kyler Murray at quarterback 17. So he is lower than ECR on him. It's still his bust of the week there. And also I would like to just, point out real quick before we sign off here, Cam and Marcus, Dan did answer your questions in the chat there. We didn't get to him necessarily yet on air, but Dan has given his 2 cents worth in the quotes there. So let's take a look at what Marcus's question is here.
Yeah, we get
four players to keep. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Adam.
We get 4 players to keep each season: Justin Jefferson, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Kupp, Amari, and Rashee Rice as top wide receivers. Should I trade Rice for Brian Thomas Jr. or Rice and Kupp for Tyreek Hill? If you're trading any of them, it would be Brian Thomas Jr., but I don't think it's worth it personally. I think it sounds like you have the depth that you're safe right now, so you may as well. I think Rashee Rice is a better player than Brian Thomas Jr., who I think is becoming a very good player in his own right, but I'd rather have Rashee Rice.
Yeah, I don't think it's a move you have to make. I don't think it's a move you should force yourself to make. And
if you're weak at the wide receiver position, I would get it. But
you're trading one for another. Sure. And you're talking about keepers. There's no guarantee you keep. There's no guarantee you keep either one of those coming into next season as well. One of the mistakes that people make when they talk about keeper leagues is they tend to look at keeper leagues more like dynasty leagues. No, you need to look at a keeper league more like a redraft league. Don't play for next season in your keeper league, because if you play for next season in your keeper league, you're not playing for this year. And great, you get to keep 2 guys, you get to keep 4 guys, you get to keep 1 guy, whatever. Look at your keeper leagues as redraft leagues, not as dynasty leagues. Don't play for the keep, play for the win this year.
Agreed. Half-point PPR, you give Waddle, Javonte, and Kareem Hunt for Achane and Wandell. Have Pacheco on IR and James Conner as the other RBs. So give Waddle, Javonte, and Hunt for Achane and Wandale. Chris, what do you think?
I think it's a little bit steep to offer. Look, I know Jalen Waddle hasn't who everybody wants to give, this season especially, but Tua will return. I do have some faith in this offense in general that it'll get more of a stride. You saw some signs of hope from the running game last week. I think the passing game will open up with that. 2 weeks ago. So I think this is a trade that I don't necessarily love.
Yeah, to add on to that just quickly, and Chase, you can chime in as well.
Go ahead.
I think Javonte, I would wait at least until a little bit longer, because I think a sell opportunity could come up. This is a really good matchup this week for him.
If that's a redraft league, I'd probably do the trade. If it's not, if it's dynasty, no way in hell.
This is our last question. Looks like Adam.
Sure. Michael Wilson or Bub Means as the wide receiver 2, full PPR on the bye week. I'm so sorry this happened to you.
Yeah.
Chase, it's not a joke. Does anybody not think it's Michael Wilson?
I think it's Michael Wilson.
Yeah.
Chris?
I want to say Michael Wilson, but I'm a Michael Wilson hater. I'm going to go with Bud Means, guys. Look, no Patrick Surtain for this Denver Broncos defense. They're going to throw to somebody for this New Orleans offense. Bud Means is a player on the practice squad that has some familiarity with Spencer Rattler. I do kind of think that holds – look, Adam, you scoff, but that holds water for a lot of these players, because a lot of times when these guys have that kind of rapport, they look for these guys. So I'm actually going to go with Bud Means in this situation. But God bless you, dude.
Yeah, I'm so sorry that happened to you. Regardless of what happens, good luck.
Spencer Rattler loves him some Bub Means because they've been playing together on the scout team for the first 5 weeks of the flipping season. But yeah, no, Michael Wilson's the better player. He's on the better offense. He's got the better quarterback. Yeah.
But in the second quarter last week, Bub Means looked pretty good. In one
good
quarter.
For Bub. He's better at football than I am.
Is this a fair trade? Jordan Mason, Tank Dell, and ETN for Kyron? I don't think so.
No.
Maybe drop Jordan Mason and we're talking, but I don't think so.
Nah. Back away from that. I don't
And-
know. I don't care what side you're on. That's a dumb trade. No, stay away from that, Jay.
Yep. All right, cool. I think that'll do it, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please, first of all, hop into the Fantasy Sports Advice Network. Ask some questions over there all week long. You can get some people, us or other people who are definitely well informed if you have any questions, as well as if you hit up I or Chase on the X machine, the Twitter, whatever you like to call it. We can get your questions answered. Dan as well, if he was here, we'll get your questions answered. No problem. Again, thank you guys so much for tuning in, and we will see you next week.
Hey there. I want to thank you for watching Operation Domination today. And if you're enjoying the show, there are some ways you can help support us. You can go to podchaser.com/Operation Domination and leave us a 5-star review. And you can do this on any podcast platform or on our YouTube page when you go to @FF Advice Network. This completely helps out the show be able to grow, and also leave us comments to let us know how we can curtail the show to you, because you are the most important member of the show. So again, go to podchaser.com/Operation Domination to leave a 5-star review and leave a comment wherever you listen or watch the show, and we'll help better serve you.